Welcome to Technado with Don Pizzette, featuring sysadmin expert Don Pizzette, security specialist Daniel Lowry, and Peter.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to this week's episode of Technado with Don Pizzette. Well, that would be me. So welcome to my podcast. And today we got a great show lined up. Peter is not with us this week. He's not dead.
Yeah,
not yet.
He hasn't gone to the great beyond.
But he's down at the HIMSS conference, and Melissa, our wonderful director, is also down at the HIMSS conference as well. So it's the inmates running the asylum here.
Oh, this is going to be fun today.
Daniel and I are left to our own devices. And speaking of which, I am joined by Daniel. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Pizzette. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today to speak in front of the committee. Usually when you're not here, Peter and I ramble on about, Scrooge McDuck or whatever. So we got to come up with something for when Peter's not here. That is our random aside.
Well, what could be our random aside?
What's that?
Cisco month.
Oh, I like it.
It is Cisco month at IT Pro TV, and we have a phenomenal guest with us here, Miss Erica Cooper from Cisco. She is joining us from, actually, where are you joining us from, Erica?
So I live in the D.C. Metropolitan area. I'm actually out of Maryland, so I'm closer to D.C., like Bowie, Maryland, so not too far.
We never know where anybody is anymore now that everybody's working remote. And
I was going to say that's in the U.S. then.
Yes, it is nation capital.
Oh, that's right. I knew I'd heard that somewhere before.
There was a city in China that was called USA, so that they could put like made in
USA,
and it would be USA, and so
clever.
I'm in DC, Lithuania.
Yeah.
All right. Well, geography is going to be in another podcast, but today we've got technical stuff going on, and we're going to learn a little bit more about Erica in our first segment, Rapid Fire Questions, which I'm going to botch because I don't see the rapid fire questions button.
They're hidden.
All these times I make fun of Peter because he doesn't find the button and then I do it. But here we go.
Who do you work for?
What's new?
Who are you?
What's happening?
What's wrong with you?
All right, Erica, in this segment, we are going to rapidly fire questions at you. You'll see a timer appear on the right side of your screen. You'll have approximately 1 minute to answer each question. If you take too long, we will buzz you like that and move on to the next question. We'll kind of go back and forth between Daniel and I on these. And the first question, I normally get to pawn off on Peter, but I get to pawn off on myself today, so it's coming from me. So our first question is, everybody knows who Cisco is. They are the world leader in networking equipment, so that's kind of a given. But people don't necessarily know you. What do you do for Cisco? What is your job role?
So I'm a senior technical leader within U.S. public sector. I deal a lot with different customers, not only on the government side, but also with the state, local education department. We call them SLED East, SLED West. And so any type of challenging, complex design scenarios, they come up, then I have to kind of come up with a solution to actually fix that and support not only our customers, but also our engineers within the organization.
Very cool, very cool. Now, my question, coming straight from the top of my head and not being read off of paper at all, is what was your journey like to get where you are today? Was IT the plan the entire time?
Absolutely. So I started out as an electrical engineer, and then once I graduated from college, I went straight into working in my field. IT's always been at the center focal point, and so I moved over from traditional voice engineer into the data world. And what you see right now, as far as from routing and switching, now into a data center, and then now into cloud. So I've had some ebbs and flows within my career, but it's been pretty fantastic because, like I said earlier, IT is the actual focal point. It's the center for everything. So I really enjoy it. I enjoy the troubleshooting. I enjoy interacting with the other engineers, and then also within my customer base as well.
All right, now I have heard that you are a CCIE, and several years ago, I set out to get the CCIE myself. I studied very, very hard, took the test. I failed the troubleshooting part, passed the configuration part. So I learned that if you want me to set up your network, you'll be fine. But if you want me to fix your network, it's a whole different story. But you, as the rumor has it, got your CCNA, CCNP, and CCIE all in 1 year. How the heck did you do that, and how miserable was that year?
Wow, so that's okay. So I have my CCNA. I've had my CCNA. Something really accurate. My CCNA, I finished up. I had it for about 10 years, and my MP, the same, about 10 years. But I finished up my CCIE in 2014. So that I did complete within a year, and that was extremely challenging. It took me 4 attempts to actually successfully pass my CCIE. I started out as a routing and switching candidate, and moved over from there into data center. And the transition was pretty smooth because routing and switching was the foundation for everything at that point. So it wasn't that hard for me to make that transition. But the data center exam is extremely difficult. It wasn't that much, reference material out there. I was reading a ton of white papers directly from Cisco systems. So just going through that and constantly labbing, I was able to successfully pass in December of 2014.
Well, congratulations. As anybody that's ever messed with Cisco stuff knows, that is no easy feat. So my hat's off to you, my dear. That said, my question is going to be about Cisco Plus and networking as a service. We're actually going to be talking about these things in an upcoming webinar. Is that something you see as the future in IT?
Absolutely. Right now, everything is going to the cloud-based services. So you're starting to see, really, I would say within the last 2 to 3 years, a dynamic shift from what I would call the traditional, network engineer, where you take your laptop, console cable, set everything up. No, it's going into heavy automation, heavy cloud as a service, or any type of, infrastructure, platform, network as a service. So that the customer right now, their requirements are starting to really become a little bit more strict as far as what they want to see out actually deployed out in their environment. So as a company, you're going to have to be able to make that shift and make it pretty quickly. Otherwise, you get left behind. So definitely network as a service or anything as a service is starting to really show prevalent in the industry right now.
I thought it was nepotism as a service. Completely wrong. Completely wrong. Weird business model.
Nah, she doesn't work for the government. She works for Cisco.
That's right.
And we do have a little bit of time left. I want to sneak an extra question in, which is obviously Cisco is constantly releasing new equipment and trying to stay on the cutting edge of technology, oftentimes innovating that new technology. How do you stay up to date on what's new, what's coming on the horizon? Like, what are some of the things you do to keep your skills sharp?
That's a great question. So I attend a lot of different conferences, and then I also stay plugged in to my social media platforms, as far as, like, for example, Twitter. If you follow Cisco Systems on Twitter, they have a lot of different new programs and new technology that they've introduced there once it's already been approved internally. So I try to stay plugged into through the seminars, and then also through either LinkedIn or Twitter, because that's pretty much. But they'll give you a lot of great updates from that perspective, and then also just interacting with my fellow colleagues. So that's how I try to stay as current as I possibly can.
Yeah,
a ton of studying and a ton of labbing as well.
And your unspoken secret there is that when you say you stay plugged in, you mean it literally. Erica is a robot.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Erica, you are a very, very technical person. You are involved in complex network design. You've got a great knowledge set. And so I'm really excited about this next segment we have, which is sometimes we get guests to come on and tell us about their worst IT nightmares. So let's cue this one up.
Worst IT nightmares.
It was a brony convention.
All right. Now, in a perfect world, IT is binary, 0 and 1. Things work or they don't work, true or false. But we all know in reality there's this gray area in between. Some people call it quantum computing. The rest of it call it an IT nightmare. So, Erica, can you share with us what is one of the, maybe you've only had one, hopefully, but what is one of the worst IT nightmares that you've experienced?
Wow, that's a great question. So one of the challenges that I've had, especially as a senior technical leader, is a lot of things that our customers come up with, we have to resolve it. And so my customer had an Azure Stack solution that I had to actually go and assist on and actually be the lead representing Cisco between my customer, and then there was Azure Stack is a joint collaboration between Cisco Systems and Microsoft themselves. And so Azure Stack provides government customers the ability to access your cloud, the cloud, public-facing cloud environment in what they call a closed or off the internet environment. So it gives government customers pretty much a secured way to access the cloud itself. And so what we did from my engineering team and myself, we went actually to one of our partners, physically installed all of the gear, installed all the top of rack switches, all of the compute storage, and also set up all the routing infrastructure and actually connected directly to the Azure portal, public facing portal itself. One of the challenges that we encountered was that when we finished up the install and we tested registration, tested all the privileged access point, privileged endpoint, connectivity, and test out the workloads and via virtual machine instances and everything, that worked great on site at our partner. When we shipped the equipment out to the customer, that was where the nightmare started, because the customer encountered several different challenges, whether it was from physical cabling to powering up things out of sequence, which when they do that, it actually corrupted the database. So at that point, it was myself, our TAC engineers from Cisco, and then also the Microsoft TAC engineers on the phone with the customer, because it was a complete troubleshooting effort between both vendors. And at that time, Microsoft had to initiate what they call break the glass. And break the glass means that you have to go in and it's equivalent to what we see on the Cisco side, which is kind of like the device boots up and it doesn't have an actual image. You have to kind of go into it and break into that ROM state and kind of recover that image and recover that database. Well, that's the equivalent to Microsoft side. So that took several hours to troubleshoot and get things back up and running, correct the databases that got corrupted, then also, fix the timing issues that had encountered because they powered up everything incorrectly. Once we finished up that, we were able to, get the actual connection between the Azure Stack equipment and back up to the public-facing Azure portal. But it was very challenging. What the unique challenge was the fact that we had to communicate and team, basically get both vendors and how we, handled, TAC calls. We had to actually handle that directly between both vendors. And that's a unique challenge because it's, Microsoft does things completely different than Cisco. But one of the things that we all agreed upon between both vendors was that the customer was the focal point, and making sure that the customer was satisfied with the installation. That was also important as well. So it was just a unique challenge overall. For the troubleshooting effort, it took quite a few hours. I would say almost about 10 to 12 hours to get that up and running. So.
Wow. There's a saying that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. We always said no plan survives first contact with the customer. Yeah. And it sounds like that's what you had. Like you obviously you have a lot of resources at your disposal. We're talking about Microsoft and Cisco. These aren't exactly startups. And so you build out the infrastructure in your own environment. Everything works perfect. And then you add the customer, and it all goes downhill. So
you're like, what are you doing with that equipment? Oh, I don't know, but it's on fire.
Well,
right.
Thank you for sharing that story with us. We really appreciate it. It's always great to talk to some of the people that are out there in the field that are the ones that are actually getting the job done, doing the technical work, not like creating a marketing slick like Peter normally does.
Yeah.
Since he's not here, we can make fun of him. So let's take one last moment here before we let you go to talk about some upcoming ventures that you've got. I heard that you're going to be attending the Grace Hopper Women's Conference. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Absolutely. So Grace Hopper is one of the true pioneers within the IT industry overall. She was the founding member for the programming language C++ as well as COBOL. So she's just a phenomenal person. So every year we have her conference that comes up, and this year I'm submitted my information to actually be one of the key speakers at the conference. So I'm going to be attending the conference talking at the conference, and then actually interacting and networking within the setting as well. So it's a great opportunity for people to come in and just really partake in just interacting with different IT members. So that's great.
All right, and you also mentioned that you're always plugged into your social media as far as being able to keep up to date on what's going on out there. If our listeners want to follow your antics, what would be the best place for them to find you?
So you can always find me on Twitter at TechLady, TechLaydee. That's my Twitter handle, and then also Cloud Expert is Cloud, and then the letter Expert Solution.com. That's always there. You can always find me talking about cloud solutions, and it's vendor agnostic. So just anything that comes up from either Azure, Google, or AWS, I always talk about it on my blog. So, and then also Cisco.com, I always try to blog there as well. So.
All right, excellent. Well, Erica, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your stories. We really appreciate it. And we'll have to have you back on the show sometime. It was a lot of fun.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, and for everybody else, we're going to stop and take a quick commercial break. When we get back, we've got the tech news, so stay tuned.
So Right Networks is an awesome company. We've developed a study group environment where we have small groups of 4 to 5 people in each of our office locations that meet once a week, and they talk together about what they're doing in their certification.
We developed a recommended reading list. We do a couple chapters each one, as well as the IT Pro TV videos.
Not only does our company provide incentives to take the tests, but we pay for the tests. We also pay for the time to study on the tests, and we give a bonus to the employees if they pass the test.
It's one thing to study for months on end toward a goal by yourself, but to have someone else with you, like, there's a lot of benefit of that.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the second segment of Technado with me. And we are jumping into our new segment. It's going to be extra fun today because Peter's not here, so it's Daniel and I. We get to do whatever we want.
We're probably
So
going to jump the rails on a few things.
We'll see
You
how
never
this one
know.
goes. But we do actually have news articles queued up. A lot of really cool stuff is happening this week. I have intentionally left a few articles off. We've been doing a little extra war coverage. I think people can get that from pretty much anywhere these days, so they don't come to Technado for that necessarily. And a little bit more of the ransomware gangs has been going on. So we're not blind to those things happening. It's just kind of becoming our new normal, which is somewhat unfortunate, I guess.
Sometimes you need a break, right?
But we do have new news, which is what we're going to cover here in our next segment.
And now, the news.
All right, Daniel, what's the first article we got queued up?
Oh, let's see what we got here. Microsoft releases DirectStorage, a new era of fast load times and detailed worlds in PC games. Sounds like earth-shattering stuff.
Yeah, it really does. All right, so it does sound kind of silly, but it is somewhat important. DirectStorage, if you're not familiar with it, is a new API that's a part of Microsoft Windows that allows some really interesting things. You know, when you look at a motherboard, you see all the copper wires that run between the components. Well, almost everything that happens on your computer gets routed through the CPU at some point or another, and that's a bit of a bottleneck for certain activities. So every now and then, we want to take a shortcut, and DirectStorage is exactly that. It's a shortcut that allows you to read data directly from an NVMe disk right into your GPU's memory. Now, video games are certainly a big use for this. This technology was rolled out originally in the Xbox last year, so it's not exactly new. But what's new here is it's coming to PC, and that's going to enable very fast rendering of video. In the past, the video would have to be copied from the NVMe to the CPU to be decompressed and then dumped into the memory of the video card, and then the video card would do its thing. Now it can go direct. And this reminds me of the old days. Daniel, you got into computing about the same time as I did.
Probably.
Do you remember DMAs?
Direct memory addressing,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, back then when you put in a PCI card or an ISA card, God forbid, something like that, any communication with that card had to go through the processor. So anytime the card talked to memory, it had to do that. And so sound cards were notoriously bad about it. And so they rolled out DMA to allow the sound card to be able to send data directly into the computer's RAM. This is the equivalent of that, except for your graphics card's memory. And way back in the DMA days, your graphics card didn't have much memory, but nowadays they ship with quite a bit, 6 gigs. I've seen 12 gig cards that are out there. So should be a substantial increase for any kind of graphics application.
I mean, they make some pretty graphics out there nowadays. I'm not going to lie. You see any of the new games that they're doling out, they look beautiful. I mean, it's just amazing. And now they're going to have this capability to make it even, I mean, you're never going to want to leave your house. Which, I will say this, though. Don, I want to get your kind of take on this. For me, I value gameplay and interesting game experience over things like graphics. What's your take on that? Do you think that the graphics are such an incorporated part of the gameplay that you can't live without it, or what do you think?
All right, we got to think about use case here and situation, because it certainly varies. And I'm not going to use video games as an example.
Okay.
I'm going to use a movie, right? Because we're movie guys.
We like movies.
Avatar. Okay. All right, Avatar. I probably just stop right there. Just throw one word out, and it elicits an emotion. There's some people out there going, "Oh, I love that movie," and then there's the rest of us.
Well, I was
like,
going to say you and me at least.
That movie sucked. Avatar was a very visual movie, right? Yeah. It was the 3D effects, and it was so dependent on it that if you saw it in the theater and you were wearing your 3D glasses like a lemming, then it was great and you loved it. But if you were like me and watched it on a Blu-ray or something, then it just wasn't as exciting. Like, it really required the graphics.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you actually shot at your television as you watched the movie, right?
the movie was really bad.
It was rough. I did not understand the love for that flick.
But moving away from video games and movies, though, we can go to business uses, right? So there are actual business uses for this. I was messing around in Zoom the other day, right? So Zoom conferencing, a lot of people use it. Zoom can run GPU accelerated. And web browsers, a lot of them are GPU accelerated. And so if you've got applications that are using your GPU to accelerate the rendering of the application, if it's graphics intensive, you could be loading it that way. And we've got companies like Facebook pushing their Meta. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff I hate. We should queue up the Don Hates IT.
Yeah, I know, right? You've got it right in front of you.
Hang on, we're going to do it. But see, Peter's not
He's
here.
not here.
This is the time to do it.
What Don hates. Yeah.
That is Peter, if I'm not mistaken.
He's here in spirit.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to tie this into Facebook's Meta.
Okay.
Sorry. It's Meta is the company.
Right.
I got to get this straight. Metaverse is the BS they're pushing on us now. Daniel, are you excited about Metaverse?
Oh, man, I peed my pants with excitement on not wanting to watch that. As my brother would say, I can't wait to not use that.
Yeah, well, you don't watch it, you experience it.
Oh, yeah, whatever. Whatever the hell it is. I don't give a crap. I do not understand, that is not my thing, no.
Yeah, well, that's an example of where DirectStorage is actually going to impact businesses, where, now you got to load your product placement. You got to load that Pepsi logo as fast as you can into your 3D world. DirectStorage will facilitate that. So it's coming to a computer near you.
And it'll look beautiful.
It'll be amazing.
They're way better than the real Pepsi logos that are out there. That's just dumb.
All right, and ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up this segment of What Don Hates.
What Don hates. Yeah.
We used it
Such a
twice.
hateful person.
Peter's going to riot when he gets back. It's
I
going to be
know.
awesome.
He's wanted that segment for so long.
All right, let's move to our next one, Daniel. What else do we got?
All right, let's see what's on the chopping block here. Apple announces $2,000 Mac Studio workstation with new 20-core M1 Ultra chip.
How dare you, Daniel? It is not a $2,000 workstation.
Oh,
it is a $1,999 discount deal.
99 cents.
Yeah, there was a big Apple announcement last week. They rolled out some new stuff. It really wasn't their most inspiring event. The ones in spring usually aren't, right? They're typically upgrades to things. But they did do something really interesting, which is finally roll out a high-end machine. A lot of people have been complaining lately that Apple's kind of their Pro logo doesn't really mean anything anymore. Like the iPad Pro isn't really like a professional business unit, and the MacBook Pro kind of stopped being Pro a long time ago.
I think they did some comparisons between the Air and the Pro, and they weren't very far off of each other.
Yeah. Well, so the difference now is on the newest ones, they put ports back on it. And so MacBook Air, no ports.
Yeah.
MacBook Pro, ports. So
it's like when I sell you a vacuum cleaner. Now, if you want this lovely electric cord that plugs into it, that's going to cost you some money.
Oh, you wanted a bag? You didn't just want the dust to blow back out?
Oh, well, you didn't say that. Welcome to Accessoryville.
Well, one thing I will say is that Apple's workstation hardware is normally outrageously overpriced. This one does start at $2,000, which is not unreasonable for a workstation. If you are a graphics editor, you probably expect to pay a solid $4,000 for a dedicated editing workstation. So this is not such a bad price. They also released their new 20-core M1 Ultra chip, which if you're confused, because I think we all are at this point, Apple marketing has lost their mind. You have the M1, the M1 Pro, the M1 Max, and now the M1 Ultra. And I made a joke about it in last week's podcast because the announcement was going on while we were in the podcast. So I was seeing some of this stuff coming out, but it's too early for me to report on it. So the M1 regular, unleaded, whatever.
I'm looking forward to the M1 Max Ultra Pro. That's going to be amazing.
Yeah, the Maxi Pro.
Yeah.
So the original M1 came out almost 2 years ago now, released in the Mac Mini, and it was kind of designed as their standard processor. The MacBook Air shipped with it as well. The M1 Pro, that's actually what I've got in this laptop right here, which is now in the MacBook Pros, and it's actually a really solid processor. I think mine has 10 cores. Then you've got the M1 Max, and that one was designed for people that do graphics and video editing that need high-end processing. It had a slightly beefed up AI. I don't know why I even bother saying AI, ML. It has a BS chip in it. And so it's got that. But the M1 Ultra, it's pretty crazy. So they released a picture that shows like the chip layout. It actually shows the silicon that's involved. And the M1 Ultra, literally, if you took two M1 Max chips, the MAX, not MACS, take two M1 Max chips and stick them together, that's exactly what the M1 Ultra looks like. So you're basically getting a dual processor system, and instead of 20 cores, you'd have 40 cores at that point of this M1 Ultra chip. It's pretty impressive.
That last chip, there's going to be just 6 of them all stacked up in it. And then the finger of God's going to come down and actually touch it, bless the chip, so that it can run at speeds unfathomable by the human mind. It'll be amazing, and we'll all die.
Do you remember the SNL skit with Super Colon Blow?
Yes, I do.
You need your fiver to stay regular, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But with Super Colon Bowl, it's the equivalent of 100 bowls of Raisin Bran. And you see all the bowls come up, and then 1,000. That's how this is, right? Using more and more chips piling up.
They were watching the Super Colon Blow, and they said, I got an idea. We are going to stack these chips together, and then one chip going to be like 12 chips. It'll be amazing. Everybody will love it.
Apple's got a ton of money. They could license that name.
So, okay, this brings me to a question, right? Because like you say, they have a ton of money. M1 chips, Apple creates their own chips, right?
Yes.
They've tooled up a system, and now they're pumping out chips left and right. So this chip shortage really isn't bothering them a whole lot when it comes to that anyway. Why don't some of these ultra-billionaire companies spin up some chip-making manufacturing? And I mean, they got the money, I think. I would think that in their pocket alone, they'd be able to spin up one of these facilities. And if not, come together and make that happen. Sure. Why are we continuing to wait on Taiwan to make this happen?
So here's my understanding, and it's a very complex issue, so I'm not going to pretend that I know all the ins and outs of it, but that the chip shortage is actually not affecting the cutting-edge, latest and greatest chips. So like if I want to go out and buy an Intel i9, I can buy one right now.
Okay.
The 11th gen, the 12th gen, there's not a shortage there. I can go and buy one, and it's no big deal, right? It's the older chips that are the problem. So a lot of the manufacturing plants, they shifted to manufacturing newer chips, and you have systems like cars, right? Where cars, they don't use cutting edge anything in a car. They want the technology to be out there for 4 or 5 years.
It's got to be stable. It's in a car. Somebody,
Exactly.
I mean, as long as the driver isn't using it, then it's got to be stable. If the driver uses it, it can die on you all day.
So when the pandemic hit, they thought, hey, people aren't going to be buying cars, so let's scale that back. And they started retooling factories for newer chips. And now that people were still buying cars, now they've got a chip shortage there. And now they're having to try and like split factories and try and manufacture different dies. It's kind of all over the place. And so they got a whole mess.
So it's so complex. It's difficult to just go, hey, let's build a building, make what we need to make, and then go back to business as usual.
And stack on top of that the logistics that even if you manufacture like 100,000 CPUs, now you got to get shipped over to the U.S. or wherever. So we'd really need domestic plants.
That sounds right.
And building a plant takes time. And there's several states that have got some, they've been doing big tax breaks and all that to try and get plants manufactured.
If you got that Jeff Bezos money, you can make it happen.
Seems like you could. Yeah. But he's busy going into space.
Well, he's got stuff to do.
So
he's like
why
to
not?
say. He's living his best life now.
Well, if you want a new Mac new Mac workstation. The name of it's actually the Mac Studio, since they didn't want to call it Pro because that name's all over the place. So
drove it to the ground. And
it is the Mac Studio. And they are actually selling an Apple monitor again. They stopped doing monitors for a while, so they do actually have an Apple branded monitor now. I haven't looked at the specs on it because they're usually overpriced.
Yeah, I was going to say about $8,000, right? And I don't mean in resolution. I mean in moolah.
Yeah, $1 per pixel.
Yeah, that's how it works.
All right. Well, let's move into your neck of the woods. I think we got a security article next, right?
We do a security. So APC, right? People that make UPSs, we all know them. We all love them. They have a 0-day bug that can remotely burn out devices, disable power as well. That sounds bad.
Now, it actually doesn't sound that bad. I'm like, all right, the UPS burns out. But what do they mean by burnout, Daniel?
They mean catch fire and burn you to the ground, and you're like a crispy critter when you're done. That's bad.
Yeah, that's bad. Even if you live somewhere like the Arctic where it's really cold, you still don't want a chemical fire in your igloo. That's just not
the gases alone that it would release. You would twist up into a ball of toxic mess before the fire got you.
So this is a really interesting one because I almost passed on this article, but when I was reading through, my first glance at it was, all right, hackers can somehow abuse the UPS to make it overheat and catch on fire. I just assumed, hey, if you've got a UPS that's a smart UPS and it's plugged into your USB connection, you can talk to it and control it. So this means the hackers have to have a foothold on a workstation that has a UPS. There were just like too many pieces to make this effective, and so I didn't think much about it. But I did read the article because I was bored, and I found where this one actually goes a lot further because the attackers don't actually need physical access. They don't even need a foothold on the machine. This is a TLS-based attack, right?
Yeah, it uses the fact that the way the cryptography works inside of the TLS exchange, that it's not actually verifying anything. So you can craft your own firmware and say, hey, do a firmware update. Actually, it takes like 3 different CVEs for this perfect storm to come into effect, and you kind of work as a man-in-the-middle attack. And then you can give it your own firmware update, and then you have that embedded code into that system. The update will apply. And people will be like, how are these hackers getting into our system? We've done all sorts of stuff to try to mitigate this, and they continue to persist. What do we do? It's because the dang UPS over there is sitting there like, don't look at me, I ain't done nothing wrong. But it's basically like an implant into your network because of this. And of course, they were able to successfully tell it to continue to spike the voltage, which caused it to blow out capacitors and everything, and override even the security, the safety mechanisms inside of it, to where it would really go buck wild and it heated up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And next thing you know, the magic smoke gets released. And if there's a white paper involved, if you read the article that we're posting and you follow it down to the white paper has pictures for the bigger words. And it is actually a pretty fascinating read on how they discovered this and the trials and tribulations that they went through to make this happen. Really fascinating stuff. So if you're in security, I highly recommend it. It's just really interesting.
Yeah, now at a high level, this is another example of attackers abusing the automatic update system. And so when the software goes to update, usually it'll build a secure connection back to its home base or mothership or whatever to be able to download updated firmware. And in this case, they're able to intercept and tamper with that traffic. So, it just shows that even if you spend a lot of time securing your systems and you're doing your updates, the updates can sometimes carry a Trojan horse at that point.
I like how they're basically, the people are like, we did all the right things and we're still screwed. This is just not fair. And it's not. It's literally not fair. This is the problem, right? Is a lot of people, I've been asked this at conferences and things of that nature, where people go, what is the state of cybersecurity? What is that like? And I'm like, it's a giant dumpster fire with other dumpsters that are on fire inside of it. That's basically what's going on. And it's because of the complexity behind it. It's so difficult to find every nook and cranny of your environment and try to put some sort of security around it, that it's just really a matter of time and effort and desire that if someone targets you, they very well may, if they have the wherewithal and the resources, they're probably going to get in. We just do the best we can, and hopefully we can discover it as soon as possible and mitigate after the fact. But that's the world we live in.
Yeah, the tricky part here is when I think of security, I start thinking, all right, are my database servers secure? Yeah. Are my directory server? Are my SSH keys stored securely? I don't think, boy, how's that UPS doing?
Yeah, right.
It's not.
And welcome to the IoT world, right? We just start connecting everything. because that is super convenient. But you'll notice that, like, we just look at last year, look at how many things happened because we decided to take systems that historically were not typically connected to the network, and we connected them to the network.
Yeah.
And then the storm of fecal matter started to occur, and hurricane poop happened all throughout 2021 and 2020 because of these lovely little things.
Yep, absolutely. And your mention of Storm there reminded me that the name of this exploit is TLS Storm.
It is.
Or is it TL Storm?
I think it's supposed to be like TLS Storm, but that's how I would say it.
Yeah, there's one S is the
TLS
point. So
Storm.
if you want to learn more about it, you can Google for TLSTORM, TL Storm, I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever it is,
something
R.L.
like that.
Stein, and you will find it.
J.K. Rowling.
It's very scary.
L.
All right,
Ron
well,
Hubbard.
that wraps up our standard news, but let's jump to our next segment, which is one of my favorites, the Deja News.
News.
I can't do the little dance like Peter did, but you did a
I
pretty
got
decent
some
job.
moves, right?
All right, so this is the segment where we revisit an article we reported on in the past, and this time it's going to be Intel's Pluton, or not Intel, Microsoft's Pluton. Daniel, what's going on?
We love Pluton. Well, maybe. I don't know. Dell does not, apparently. Dell opts out of Microsoft's Pluton security for Windows.
All right, well, last year at the big Microsoft conference back in, I believe it was in August, Microsoft announced the Pluton security chip, a way to embed more security controls directly in the CPU of a system. Obviously, they're going to be incorporating this into their Microsoft Surface eventually, but they're encouraging everyone else to do the same. Let's take advantage of it. Windows 11 expects to have functionality like this, either in the form of a TPM or in the form of a Pluton feature built into your CPU. Well, to date, Intel isn't selling any CPUs with Pluton built into them, so that makes it kind of hard to get. And now Dell has come out and said that Microsoft's Pluton does not conform to Dell's requirements. Now, what does that mean? Well, Dell is trying to make all of their customers happy. And that means they ship laptops not only with Windows, but sometimes with Linux and other operating systems, and they have to meet certain standards that have been tested and verified by their customers. And TPMs, traditional trusted platform modules, TPMs have already been through that testing, right? TPM version 2.0 is kind of what we see in a lot of systems. That obviously implies there were earlier versions. There was 1.0 and 1.1, and 2.0 is common now. So they've already been certified by the customers. They know how to use them. Linux supports the TPM. Microsoft Pluton is not there yet. And so for those of you who may have been excited to try out this new technology, it looks like it's going to be a while. You couple this with the chip shortage, they're not going to manufacture chips that people aren't buying. And so it looks like Microsoft's Pluton may have been derailed a little bit, which is unfortunate in a sense and not unfortunate. Like, most people already have TPMs. But TPMs are typically outside of the CPU. I say typically because on my computer at home, the TPM is actually part of the CPU. But on some people's, it's outside. And that means an attacker can abuse that. Daniel, you told me a story about that,
Yeah,
right?
we were kind of talking about some of the pros and cons for using TPM versus something that's built into the chip itself. TPM, how does it actually communicate with your CPU? There's a bus. And therefore, you might be able to extract information by, kind of hijacking the bus and seeing what's kind of crossing across that bus. And maybe you never know. You could find encryption keys, and they might be useful for you as an attacker. So that's one of the things. That's one of the attacks. But I also was reading about how Dell was really saying that when they mean customers that like TPMs, they mean government, right? The government hasn't adopted Pluton as a system, and therefore it doesn't make business sense for them to go forward with that. Am I correct on this?
Yeah. And I haven't read their financial reports or whatever, but it's pretty safe to assume that the U.S. government is probably Dell's number one customer.
Yeah.
And so
they're always slow to adopt.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
What you gonna do?
And, TPM's already kind of fit the need for most people, so that's kind of the way that Dell's going to stay, and you'll see a lot of other vendors doing that too. Intel, obviously not in a hurry to get this rolled out. So that's where it stands. And, I'm going to get a double dip here on Deja News, because one of the requirements of Windows 11, if you want to install Windows 11, you have to have a TPM. And I've actually been surprised at how many machines are out there. I hear from people saying, hey, Don, I can't upgrade to Windows 11. And it turns out they don't have a TPM. Even computers bought as recently as this year. Like, you can go to Best Buy, and not every laptop on the shelf has a TPM in it. It's because they used to not bother with home computers. Why put a TPM on it? Who cares? Well, now we're kind of getting bit in the butt on that, because it's very difficult, not impossible, but very difficult to add a TPM to a computer. Most computers don't have the extra port for it, so because it has a special header. And so one challenge is people want Windows 11, but they don't have a TPM. They don't necessarily need that level of security. Microsoft was kind of on the fence, sort of saying, well, there's a way to bypass it. You might be able to do it, but we're not going to support you. Well, the popular disk imaging utility Rufus, which is free. You can go and download Rufus. Just search for RUFUS, Rufus.
Rufus.
Yeah, like Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
So Rufus, in addition to saving the future of all humanity, is useful for making like Linux boot disks and other things. But it now has built into the application where it can download the Windows 11 ISO, or if you already have it, and it can patch it to not require a TPM. So if you want to build install media that doesn't require a TPM, it's pretty easy to do so.
Could I spin up a virtual machine with that?
You could, yeah.
That'd be cool. Then you can play with Windows 11, see if you like it. If you don't, you blow it away, and then you haven't lost anything on your desktop.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are some virtualization products like VMware where you can do a virtual TPM.
Oh, that's right.
So even if your host doesn't have a TPM, you can do a virtual
Still
one and
squared
spin
away.
up a VM.
Nice.
But not everyone does, and it's also not the easiest thing to configure.
Yeah.
So if you can just patch it out,
I
there
like
you go. For a learning machine or whatever, that'd be fine. I wouldn't want to necessarily do like production use that way.
Don't be a sissy, Don.
Yeah.
We like to live life on the edge here.
What has me worried on that one is where Microsoft said that you might not get security updates. And nobody really knows what that means, but that just knowing that risk is there is enough to deter me from doing it. If you want to check out Rufus, their website is rufus.ie. Rufus.ie. I wonder what country IE is.
No, Iceland,
Indonesia?
It would be. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of countries that start with I think.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to look up what that country code is while you introduce our. Oh, actually, wait.
You got a theme song.
Our next segment. Yeah, we got a do for this week, so let me cue that up.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, so, do.
All right. Well, in our do, we've got a great article coming from China. Daniel, what is it?
Oh man, the Chinese never cease to make us happy, because this one is smuggler tapes 160 Intel CPUs to the body, gets busted entering China.
Yeah, that can happen.
Yeah.
So 160 CPUs, and apparently this is not the first time. They actually got somebody last month.
This is like a thing.
The one last month, they had 256 CPUs taped about their body, and I was surprised because...
Is that the record?
Is there a record?
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, well, the ones who are the best at it don't get caught.
That's true. That's true.
So these are the CPUs in question here are 10th, 11th, and 12th generation Intel CPUs. 12th generation is the current one. i5s, i7s, i9s. So these aren't like some proprietary CPU or whatever. These are standard desktop and server CPUs that are being smuggled into China. Now, I thought this was pretty interesting because Intel is a U.S. company, and we don't have trade embargoes with China right now. There's some of the encryption limiting stuff or whatever, but they're free to sell Intel CPUs into China. So it's a little unclear as to why somebody would feel the need to smuggle these in unless they were like imitation or stolen.
I would think something along the lines, because I think of of Goodfellas, right? They would steal a truck with a bunch of liquor on it and then just sell it at like super low price. It was all profit because it was stolen, so it could be that.
And we've heard about entire trucks of graphics cards being stolen, right. And I forget which company it was, NVIDIA or whoever, where they said, all right, well, we're going to invalidate the warranty on those cards. But the cards still work.
So apparently, though, there is a customs fee on bringing in those items from outside the country, though. So it was probably easier to get them at either a lower price or stolen from a different area and then try to bring them in. And if you don't pay the customs fee, then it really pays off for you, because once you sell them, it's all profit.
That's true. Like you used to back in the day when people smoked, you could buy cigarettes on the internet and not pay the tobacco tax.
Right. Or if you go on a cruise, you get like tax-free or duty-free liquor and stuff. Right? Same kind of idea.
I prefer all my liquor without duty.
That's funny.
That's my grown-up joke of the day right there.
That's a poop joke. That makes me chuckle.
See, when Peter's gone, we can let loose.
I just, for some reason, I'm seeing you like clean Oh, I got some duty on this. Well, slicker, it'll sterilize it.
I wanted it duty free.
I prefer without duty, but I'm an alcoholic. So.
I will take my traveler's checks to a competing resort.
Yeah, that's true. What is that from?
Office Space.
Office Space.
And I said no salt.
But there are large grains of salt all over it.
So I am embarrassed that I didn't know what .ie was. It is Ireland.
Oh, is it Ireland?
Which
really?
I thought was .ir, which turns out to be Iran. Iran and Ireland, a little bit different.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see where you would get confused, but there's
not.
a distinction. Yeah.
Not really. So basically the smuggling is happening. I think we are going to see more of this. There's the chip shortage, right? So people stealing chips and selling them on the black market, I think, is going to become somewhat common. Obviously not in huge numbers. I have to wonder where these are going to be used. Like regular Intel CPUs aren't really suitable for any kind of cryptocurrency mining. Like you don't get the speeds out of them that you would out of a graphics card. So I don't know what the use would be here. And I'm having a hard time even making one up.
So the article said that an i5 or something goes for like $550. So if you sold those at, let's say, $200 a piece, they'll probably fly off of your shelves. And you made a shelf a tidy tum.
I just gave Wes an i5 the other day that I didn't need anymore. Yeah. I need to talk to him.
Was it a 12th gen, though? I think these were...
Oh, no, it wasn't a 12th.
These were 11th and 12th gen.
I think it was like a 7th or 8th gen.
Yeah. So... those probably go for significantly less.
Well, if you feel like taking the risk, you can be instead of a drug mule, you can be a CPU mule.
Man, I don't want to see the next generation of people trying to hide that through the border. Oh, and there was something about why they don't do AMD, because AMD still has pins, and Intel does not.
That's a good point. Can't put that in a balloon.
No, that's it's man. Like I said, I wouldn't want to be that mule.
All right. Well, that is the brave new world of contraband technology
Indeed.
Right out there. So if you're ever bored, though, check out that article because they have pictures of the guy where they basically bundled them up into stacks of 9 kind of in paper. And then you saran wrap to wrap them around his calves, his lower legs, so that his pants would cover it and he could just walk through. But pretty easy to pick up on a metal detector. Or in this case, they said the guy was just acting weird. And so in many countries... In many countries, if you're acting weird, that's enough. And
that's all they need.
I think it's like that here in the U.S., right? If you're crossing the border, they can... Yeah, I think they can do that here, too.
If you're crossing the border, and it's not at a designated border crossing.
Well, this was at a designated crossing, right? It was at a port.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But if you're acting weird, suspicion, right? That's a probable cause.
I guess so.
Come on over here, sir, while we rubber glove up.
Well, speaking of probable cause and invasive searches, we got some great things coming up in the next month. Obviously, you want to tune back in next week because Peter will be back and the podcast will be back on the rails again. Yeah. But it is Cisco month over at IT Pro TV, and we've got a really cool webinar coming out. You can get to it if you want to by going to the Technado website at technado.com. Or you can jump over to itpro.tv/webinars. But on March 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern, we've got Cisco's Networking as a Service is finally here. We mentioned NAS, or Network as a Service, earlier, and we didn't really define it. If you don't know what it is, here's a great chance to learn. We've got a representative for Cisco is going to be on there. Actually, wait. We've got the Anthony Sequeira is going to be there. I mean, Sequoia.
Sequoia.
Anyhow, it's fun to mispronounce the name. But yeah, Anthony's going to be here. And so he's going to jump on and tell us all about Network as a Service, what that means, how Cisco fits into that and the solution. And like Erica said earlier, it's kind of the way of the future.
And he's going to juggle cats while setting himself on fire.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
It's going to be amazing.
You'd think he could only do it once,
That's
but
right.
I've seen it.
Anthony's worked out a method.
Commitment.
What are you going to do?
Yep. So that's coming up on March 24th. Be sure to check that out. And also remember, if you want to pursue your IT certifications and establish an amazing IT career like Daniel and I have,
Is that what we got?
I know we're terrible role models. But you can do so over at IT Pro TV. If you do, when you sign up, make sure you use the promo code Technado30 to save 30% off the lifetime of your account. That's right, not
30%?
30%.
Not 0.30.
And not just for that first month, but for the life of your account. That's an amazing opportunity. Be sure to check that out. Also, and here's where I get a little dicey because it's social media side, but remember to check out our social media tweets and faces and all that stuff.
I know that you can't stop yourself. Don's a tweet crazy person. He just loves to tweet all day long.
You know what actually does help us, though, is subscribe to the podcast on Apple's podcast utility or on any of the various podcasting services that are out there. Make sure to check those out. And if you have any questions, listener mail, you can leave all that on technado.com or my favorite website, techne.do, also available. And you can use our social media at ITProTV on Twitter or hashtag Technado questions. We monitor for that, and your question might be featured here on the podcast. If it is, we'll send you a shirt and some stickers and stuff.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Get some swag.
Yep. We accept questions.
Mama
jokes. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, definitely.
We haven't had a good mama joke in a while.
No, not in a little while. We'll have to work on one.
We will.
All right, everybody. Well, that's going to be our wrap. Daniel, any parting words for our guests?
No.
All right.
Goodbye.
That's it. All right. Well, I had a lot of fun. Next week, we'll be back with Peter, so the fun will be dead, but it'll be a podcast, so make sure you're there. Thanks for watching. Signing off for Technado. I've been your host, Don Pizzette, here with Daniel. We'll see you next week.